Today I'm going to do something a little uncomfortable. Okay, maybe a lot uncomfortable. I'm going to take the device you're likely holding in your hand right now or sitting in your pocket, and I'm going to turn it into a total stranger. A stranger that is actively gaslighting you, to be specific. Yeah, that is a terrifying way to put it. But based on the stack of source material we're going through today, it's pretty accurate. We're pulling from reports by Amnesty International, Citizen Lab, Google's Threat Analysis Group, and some really deep technical breakdowns from Jamf and Lookout. And they all center on this one specific betrayal. All right, you know that little green dot on your screen? The one that lights up when the camera's on? The orange one for the microphone, right? We've basically been trained, Pavlovian style, to trust those dots. Like, if the light is off, the camera is off. That is the contract we have with our phones. Well, today I'm going to tear up that contract. Because I'm digging into Predator. It's this commercial spyware that is developed by Intellexa. Intellexa is a commercial spyware consortium founded by former Israeli intelligence officer Tal Dillian. It can record you, listen to you, track you, and surgically disable those safety lights so you never even know what's happening. And we really need to emphasize that this isn't science fiction. This is a real product. It has a price tag, it has a customer support team, and it's being sold by this group called the Intellexa Consortium to governments all over the world. My study shows governments in places like Egypt, Greece, Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, Sudan, and Botswana have reportedly used tools like this. And its capabilities are just staggering. Because we aren't just talking about, oh, I clicked a bad email link. There is something called Aladdin, which lets them hack your phone through mobile ads without you clicking a single thing. The zero-click holy grail. It's the difference between a burglar who needs you to accidentally leave the front door open and one who can literally just walk through the walls. And that's the part that really keeps me up at night. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty of the code, the hacking, and those security weak spots, let's start with the big picture. Those super detailed technical reports can sometimes feel a little dense and hard to follow. We really need to look at what this actually feels like for a human being on the receiving end. Now let's put a composite view of the targets, particularly focusing on the files related to the Greek wiretapping scandal. So I want to introduce a case study to kind of walk us through it. The main character of our story, let's call him David. He's a mid-level journalist based in Athens. And when I say journalist, don't picture someone just sitting at a desk rewriting press releases. Picture someone actively investigating political corruption, European tech policy. He knows he's a potential target, so he's what we in the industry would call a hardened user. He's not careless. So let's start with his morning. It's a Tuesday in Athens, and the city is already loud. His espresso machine is hissing, filling this old chipped mug he's probably used for years. He props his phone against a jar of honey and just casually scrolls the morning headlines. Siri interrupts to confirm a reminder, and honestly, it all feels completely normal and routine. And in David's mind right now, he believes he's completely safe, no question about it. He uses Signal for sources. He keeps his VPN on. He's careful. He's disciplined. He doesn't click random links. He's not careless. He knows the risks of his job. He truly believes he's built himself a digital fortress, and that nothing can get inside. What David didn't know, as he licked honey from his thumb and headed out the door, was that his phone had been bifurcated. A digital ghost now lives in its circuits, a parasite known only as Predator. The infection didn't happen that morning. It happened way back when he read an article on the topic of the UK's Online Safety Act on the Guardian website, when there was an ads placed between the paragraphs while he was scrolling down the screen. He had no idea that this normal operation would cause him to be hacked by the Predator spyware. The infection, developed by a company called Citrox and marketed by the shadowy Intellexa Consortium, was flawless. It required no further clicks, no user errors. It was simply there. And it came with a devastating capability. The phone's most trusted security feature had been surgically neutered. The little orange dot that should appear in the status bar when the microphone is active, silenced. The green dot for the camera, permanently dimmed. David could check his control panel 100 times a day and see only darkness, a reassuring absence that meant private. It meant nothing. So let's flash forward to this Tuesday. At the cafe, the journalists rest. He ordered a Freddo cappuccino and opened his laptop. His phone, placed screen down on the table beside his computer, continued its silent work. The microphone was no longer a dormant component waiting for a trigger word. It was a live wire, streaming continuously to a buffer. The camera, too, had been activated, not to take photos, but to provide a low-resolution feed of his surroundings every few minutes, just enough to see who he was with, what documents lay on the table. David glanced at his phone screen, instinctively checking for the green dot. Nothing. He felt a flicker of reassurance and returned to his laptop. When the source, a weary-looking mid-level ministry official, slid into the seat opposite him, the Predator software noted the timestamp and flagged the audio stream for immediate, prioritized exfiltration. The front-facing camera captured a single frame of the man's face as he sat down, just enough for facial recognition software to later confirm his identity. "Thanks for coming, Manos," David said, lowering his voice. Manos glanced around nervously. "This is the last time, David. I can't. It's too risky. The new digital border management tender. It's weird. The company that wins it has already been picked. It's a consortium with ties to the same people who sell the toys." Manos tapped David's phone on the table. "The things that go in there. Be careful." He slid a USB stick across the table. David palmed it smoothly, slipping it into his bag. The camera, still live, captured the handoff in crisp detail. An algorithm flagged the physical transfer of a data storage device, the hushed tones, the nervous body language. The metadata of the meeting, duration, location, participants, was packaged neatly. Back at his apartment that afternoon, David plugged the USB stick into his laptop. It was encrypted. He spent hours trying to crack the password, to no avail. Frustrated, he emailed his editor. "Need to see Costas. Have something physical, but it's locked tight. I think he might know a guy." He hit send. Predator read the email before it ever reached the server. The word physical was a red flag. The mention of Costas, a known security researcher, was another. The system flagged the entire communication for high-priority human review. Later that night, David was restless. He lay in bed, scrolling through photos on his phone. Pictures of his mother at her name day celebration. A silly shot of his cat, Pericles, tangled in a curtain. A screenshot of a book he wanted to buy. He didn't notice that his phone was slightly warm, even though it had been on the charger for hours. He didn't question the small, inexplicable spike in his mobile data usage. What he did notice was a soft electronic click. It sounded like it came from the phone's earpiece speaker. He held the phone up to his ear. Silence. He pulled it back and looked at the screen. No green dot, no orange dot. Just his wallpaper, serene and untroubled. He shook his head. Probably a notification glitch. This thing is getting old. Somewhere else in the world, while David was sitting alone in his apartment, someone was sitting in another room, holding a cup of coffee, watching him, not metaphorically, literally watching him. Through his own on that screen, David's face filled the frame. You could see his eyes moving, scanning the top of the phone, looking for that tiny green dot, that little signal Apple promised, the one that's supposed to warn you when the camera is on. But it never appeared. And then something subtle happened. His expression changed. He relaxed. He shrugged, put the phone down, and went back to sleep. In that moment, that missing green dot didn't scare him. It comforted him, and that was the trap. Back in that other room, the person watching him switched from the camera to the microphone. Now they could hear him. His breathing, the rustle of his sheets, even the faint sound of traffic outside his window in Athens. They listened, like someone standing quietly inside his room, without ever being there. After a few moments, they saved the recording, tagged it, filed it away, and moved on to the next person. To them, David wasn't a person. He was just another open window, another live feed, another file. And here's the part that really gets me. David never knew. He slept peacefully, believing his phone was off, believing those little indicator lights were protecting him, believing he was alone. Let me ask you something. Does that make the hair on your arm stand up? Because it should. Because David wasn't careless. He was smart. He used Signal. He used ExpressVPN. He did the things we're told to do. And it still happened. So the real question is, how? How does software turn on your camera without turning on the warning light? How does someone get inside your phone without you clicking anything? Without you doing anything wrong? And the truth is, what I'm about to show you next is even more unsettling. Because this is where Predator changes everything. All right, this is where we have to slow down and peel the story back a little bit. Because there are really two layers to what's happening here. The first layer is psychology, how attackers get close to a target. And the second layer is the technology, the tricks that make the attack invisible once they're in. So let's start with the psychology. A lot of people imagine these attacks only work if someone does something careless. You know, clicking some obvious scam link from a sketchy email. But in reality, it's usually much more subtle than that. When attackers go after high-value targets, they do their homework. They study the person's job, their habits, even their schedule. Then they create situations that feel completely routine. Security researchers have documented cases like this involving high-profile individuals, people such as Egyptian political figures, who received messages tailored precisely to their professional responsibilities. In one example described by researchers at Citizen Lab, the message looked like it came from an assistant editor on WhatsApp. Imagine you're a journalist, and your editor sends you a link you're supposed to review. Of course you're going to open it. Or imagine you get a DHL delivery notification, right when you're actually waiting for a package. These attacks work because they tap into something real in your life. You're not being reckless. You're just doing your job. So it's important to say this out loud. If someone falls for something like that, it's not because they're dumb. It's because they're human. And smart people get targeted in smart ways. But here's the twist with Predator. Sometimes attackers don't even need those psychological tricks. Because once they find a way into the digital ecosystem, advertising networks, hidden redirects, compromised websites, the technical part of the attack can happen silently. No suspicious message, no strange link, no warning. And that's where things start to get really unsettling. Because to understand how Predator pulls this off, we need to talk about something called Aladdin. Now the name sounds almost playful, like something out of a fairy tale. But the reality is closer to a nightmare. Aladdin is what researchers describe as a zero-click attack system, meaning the victim doesn't have to click anything. And that raises the obvious question. How can a phone get infected by an ad if I never tap the ad? Well, according to investigations by groups like Amnesty International and other security labs, the attack abuses the entire mobile advertising ecosystem. Well, according to investigations by groups like Amnesty International and other security labs, the attack abuses the entire mobile advertising ecosystem. Think about the banner ads you see when you're reading the news, checking sports scores, or looking up a recipe online. Those ads don't just appear randomly. Behind the scenes, there's a huge automated market called real-time bidding. Every time you load a web page, an auction happens in milliseconds to decide which advertisement gets shown to you. Attackers can participate in that same system. They set up shell companies with boring, generic names, something that looks like a completely normal advertising business. Then they buy ad space, just like any legitimate company would. Except their targeting is extremely precise. They can target by country, by network, sometimes even by a specific IP range if they know roughly where the person is connecting from. So imagine David. He's just reading the news, maybe checking soccer scores. A small advertisement loads at the bottom of the page. David doesn't click it, he doesn't even look at it. But the moment the phone tries to render that ad, just the process of drawing it on the screen, malicious code hidden inside the ad can exploit a vulnerability in the browser engine. On iPhones, that engine is called WebKit, the software that powers the Safari browser and many web views inside apps. If the exploit succeeds, the code breaks out of what's called the sandbox. The sandbox is a security barrier that's supposed to keep web content isolated from the rest of the operating system. But once that barrier is broken, the attack can quietly download the Predator spyware in the background. No notification, no pop-up, nothing visible at all. Which, when you think about it, is pretty unfair. You didn't make a mistake. You didn't click a link. You just used the internet. That's why zero-click exploits are so valuable. They remove the human variable entirely. Once the attackers are inside the phone, they can gain extremely deep access, sometimes even what's called root access, which basically means full control of the device. And that leads to the next mystery. If they can access the camera or microphone, how do they stop the warning lights from appearing? If they can access the camera or microphone, how do they stop the warning lights from appearing? Because most people assume those indicators are hardwired. Like an old webcam where the LED is physically tied to the camera power. But modern smartphones don't work like that. On devices like the iPhone, those privacy indicators are actually controlled by software, specifically by a core system process called Springboard. Springboard is essentially the manager of the entire iPhone interface, the home screen, app launching, system notifications. Think of it as the traffic controller for the operating system. When an app activates the camera or microphone, the system sends a signal to Springboard. Springboard then turns on those little green or orange dots at the top of your screen. So imagine Springboard as the person responsible for flipping the on-air sign outside a radio studio. When the microphone turns on, the signal tells that person, flip the switch. What researchers discovered is that Predator doesn't break the light. It doesn't cut the wire. Instead, it intercepts the message. Through a programming trick used in Objective-C, the language much of iOS is built on, the spyware redirects that signal to nil, which basically means send this message to nothing. No error, no crash, the instruction just disappears. So the system thinks it successfully told Springboard to turn on the indicator. But the message never reaches it. The microphone works. The camera works. But the indicator light never receives the command. Both the green camera dot and the orange microphone dot can be silently suppressed, which means the phone continues operating normally while quietly lying to its owner about what it's doing. And honestly, the engineering behind it is almost disturbing in its elegance. It's sophisticated, it's subtle, and in a strange way, it's like gaslighting, but done by software. Your phone is functioning perfectly, except it's constantly telling you that everything is fine, even when it isn't. Alright, so at this point, a lot of people ask the same question. You know, when your computer starts acting weird, or you think you clicked something bad, the classic solution is turn it off, reboot it, hope for the best. So the obvious question is, would that work against something like Predator? Well, sometimes, but it's not the full solution. And this brings us to one of the more clever and honestly pretty annoying design choices researchers discovered when analyzing Predator. The researchers at Citizen Lab found that in some cases the spyware doesn't try to stay permanently installed in the traditional sense. Instead, it relies on something called reinfection triggers. Here's how that works. Modern smartphones are full of automation tools designed to make life easier. On the iPhone, there's an app called Shortcuts. You might have used it to automate things like dimming the lights when you open Netflix or sending a text when you arrive home. It's actually a very powerful system built directly into the operating system. What Predator can do is create a hidden automation trigger. And the trigger is something incredibly ordinary, like opening an app. The analysis lists dozens of common apps: Mail, Safari, Messages, the App Store, basically the apps you touch all day long. So imagine this scenario. You restart your phone. You feel relieved. Maybe the malicious process that was running in memory actually did disappear. For a moment, you might actually be clean. But then 10 minutes later, you open your email, and that simple action triggers the automation. Silently in the background, the phone reaches out to a command server controlled by the attacker, and the spyware gets downloaded again. You didn't click anything. You didn't install anything. You just checked your email. In other words, the system is using your own habits against you. And I know at this point, a lot of people feel overwhelmed. You hear about this and think, great, so what am I supposed to do? Throw my phone in the ocean? But here's the important pivot. This isn't magic. It's just software. And software has limits. Even law enforcement has run into those limits. There are documented cases where investigators struggled to access phones that were properly hardened with the right protections enabled. So the good news is, there are defenses, and we can boil them down to a few simple rules of thumb. Let's start with the most powerful one. Rule number 1 is something called lockdown mode. If you've ever scrolled through the settings on an iPhone, you may have seen it buried near the bottom. Most people ignore it because the name sounds extreme. But if you're a journalist, an activist, a researcher, or honestly just someone who cares about privacy, it's worth understanding what it actually does. Lockdown mode fundamentally changes how the phone handles web content. One of the key things it disables is something called JIT, which stands for Just-in-Time JavaScript Compilation. Now that sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Modern websites run a lot of code. To make them load quickly, your phone's browser converts that code into machine instructions while the page is loading. That's the just-in-time part. It's fast. But fast systems are often complex, and complexity is exactly where security bugs hide. Many sophisticated mobile exploits rely on weaknesses in that JIT system to escape the browser's sandbox. So lockdown mode basically says, nope. It shuts that door completely. It disables JIT for web content and also blocks certain risky features like automatic link previews or attachment rendering in messages. Now you might be thinking, okay, but does that turn my phone into a brick? Not really. Websites might load a little slower. Some fancy web features might not work. But the phone itself works perfectly fine. And there's a pretty strong endorsement of its effectiveness. In some court filings, investigators from the Federal Bureau of Investigation acknowledged that devices running lockdown mode made forensic extraction significantly more difficult. So if a defense can slow down professional forensic teams, it's probably going to ruin the day of commercial spyware vendors like Intellexa. Now, if you're using Android, the exact feature name is different, but the idea is similar. Android has a feature called Advanced Protection and a hardened browsing environment through Google Play Protect and Chrome Site Isolation and Exploit Mitigations. If you want a lockdown-style setup on Android, there are a few key things to enable. First, keep automatic security updates turned on. Many spyware attacks rely on unpatched vulnerabilities. Second, use a browser with strong sandboxing and exploit protections. Chrome on Android already includes a lot of those defenses. Third, enable Google's Advanced Protection program if you're in a high-risk profession. It adds stronger account security and limits risky app behavior. And finally, avoid installing apps outside the official App Store whenever possible. None of these steps make you completely invincible, but they dramatically raise the cost of attacking your device. And that's the real goal of security. You don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to make yourself a much harder target. Alright, so that's a pretty strong first defense. So the next obvious question is, what's rule number 2? Rule number 2 is something surprisingly simple. I call it the reboot ritual. Earlier we talked about how Predator tries to stay persistent using tricks like automation triggers. But there's another important detail researchers found. A lot of advanced mobile spyware prefers to live in RAM, the phone's temporary memory. And there's a reason for that. If the spyware writes itself permanently to the storage drive, it becomes much easier for forensic investigators to detect later. So instead, it tries to stay memory resident, which means if you completely power the phone off, that memory gets wiped. Exactly. The moment the device truly shuts down, everything sitting in RAM disappears. Now, the attackers might still have mechanisms that try to reconnect later, maybe through a trigger or a reinfection vector, but a reboot breaks the active control session immediately. And that matters, because it forces the attacker to start the whole chain again. In cybersecurity, we sometimes call this raising the cost of the attack. Researchers from Kaspersky have even looked at system logs, things like a file called shutdown.log, which records when a device powers down. Those logs sometimes contain artifacts related to spyware activity, but more importantly, frequent reboots create what you might call a high-friction environment for the malware. It's like forcing an intruder to pick the lock on your door every single day. Eventually, they might just move on to an easier house. Now, some people bring up a scary idea here. They say, wait, I've heard about malware that can fake a reboot. And yes, that technique exists. Some advanced implants can simulate a shutdown animation. The screen goes black, maybe you see a spinner, but the operating system never actually powers down. The device just pretends. But in practice, that's still relatively rare in the mobile spyware world. A true hardware reboot, holding the power and volume buttons until the actual boot logo appears, is still a very reliable disruption tactic. So one practical habit, when you pour your morning coffee, just reboot the phone. Make it part of the routine. David had a morning ritual. This one is just a little safer. Alright, so we've got lockdown mode, we've got the reboot ritual. Now let's talk about rule number 3. This one is all about breaking the delivery system. Remember the attack vector we talked about earlier? the one researchers nicknamed Aladdin? That method relies heavily on the online advertising ecosystem, so the easiest way to fight it is to stop those ads from loading in the first place. And yes, the solution really is that simple. Use a strong ad blocker. A privacy-focused browser like Brave or Firefox Focus blocks a huge portion of advertising scripts by default. On iPhone, you can also install strict content blockers for Safari. And if the ad never loads, the browser never renders the malicious code, which means the exploit never runs. In that very specific context, an ad blocker is almost acting like a preventative antivirus layer. It's cutting the infection chain before it even begins. But there's a second part to this rule, and honestly, it's still one of the most powerful defenses in cybersecurity: the human firewall. Never click a link from an unexpected text message, SMS, WhatsApp, Telegram. If the number looks unfamiliar, treat the link like it's radioactive, even if the message says something urgent. Your package delivery failed. Your account is locked. Your boss needs you to review a document. Attackers design these messages to trigger responsibility and urgency, and that's exactly why they work. Think about David again. He clicked the permit link because it was literally part of his job. He wasn't careless. He was just doing his work. So the rule is simple. If you get a link, verify it somewhere else. Call the person. Open the official website directly. Type the tracking number manually. Just don't trust the text message itself. And honestly, that advice isn't just for investigative journalists in Athens. That's good digital hygiene for everyone with a smartphone. Before we wrap up today, I want to zoom out for a second. We've been talking about David, we've talked about politicians and journalists, but there's a much bigger picture here, because when it comes to spyware like Predator, there's something security researchers call the ripple effect. Most of us think of our phones as personal devices. If my phone gets hacked, well, my photos are gone, my messages are exposed. End of story. But that's not actually how it works. If a phone is infected with spyware like Predator, it doesn't just collect information about you. It pulls your contacts. It reads your messages. It can scrape your photo gallery, which means if one person gets compromised, the attackers suddenly gain visibility into an entire network of people. Your family, your coworkers, your friends. In the case of some journalists that were targeted in Greece, researchers found that infections could expose confidential conversations with sources, the very people who trusted them to keep those identities safe. That's a heavy responsibility, because suddenly it's not just about protecting yourself anymore. It also reframes that old argument you hear all the time: I've got nothing to hide. Maybe you don't, but your brother might, your colleague might, your source might. Your phone is connected to their privacy too. So when you take steps to secure your device, you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting everyone in your digital circle. And here's another important point. The infrastructure behind these attacks, the ad networks, the shell companies, the exploit delivery systems, they all live on the same internet we all use every day. We're all driving on the same digital highways. Right now, companies like Intellexa may be targeting high-value individuals, but the mechanisms they use, malicious ads, exploit chains, compromised websites, look almost identical to normal internet traffic until the moment they reach a device. That's why collective defense actually matters. The more everyday users adopt privacy tools, ad blockers, security updates, features like lockdown mode, the harder and more expensive it becomes for these mercenary spyware companies to operate. In a way, it's a bit like herd immunity, but for digital security. The stronger the baseline defenses across the internet, the fewer places these attacks can hide. So if there's one idea I want you to walk away with today, it's this. You are not just a passive user of technology anymore. You are the guardian of your network's data. We started this story with a pretty scary image, a phone that can secretly watch and listen while pretending everything is normal, a device that lies to you with a missing green dot. But we also saw something important. Predator isn't magic, it's software. And software has limits. Code can be patched, code can be blocked, code can be disrupted. So here's a simple action you can take today. Pick up your phone. If you're using an iPhone, open Settings, go to Privacy and Security, and scroll all the way down until you see Lockdown Mode. You don't necessarily have to turn it on right now if you're not in a high-risk profession. But know where it is. Think of it as the emergency brake for your device. And while you're already in Settings, go to General Right Pointing Arrow Software Update. Seriously, Check it. Companies like Apple and Google release security patches all the time, often fixing the exact kinds of vulnerabilities these spyware tools depend on. If your phone is running software from 6 months ago, you may be leaving doors open that have already been locked in newer versions. So update your device, use an ad blocker, and every now and then, just restart the phone. The green dot on your screen might not always tell the whole truth, but the defenses you put in place, those are something you can control. Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If commercial software can be designed to seamlessly override and lie about a hardware indicator light on our phones, what happens when this exact same logic is applied to the microphone in your smart TV or the digital lock on your front door? If software can always lie, are we eventually going to have to go back to physical, mechanical switches that literally break the circuit to ever feel truly private again? Something to think about next time you check the lights on your router.
That wraps up today's discussion. Thanks for watching and tuning in. If you're curious to dive deeper into this topic, make sure to visit our website. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss an update. See you next time.